Okay, so it's time to start our roundtable discussion. Okay, so I will introduce our four panelists. Thank you very much for participating to this roundtable discussion on urban mobility futures. So welcome to Marie Sévenet, who is a researcher at the European Institute for Energy Research in Karlsruhe. We will also have Hervé Philippe, senior officer at the Ministry of Transport. Welcome also to Sebastian Gotthas, urban planner, architect, and entrepreneur, who is co-founder of CityLinks in Shanghai and Rotterdam, and our PhD student on urban mobility futures, Jacques Gao. So how are we all together around the virtual table?
Yeah.
Yeah, good.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I think we will move. In fact, we will have 3 rounds. So first of all the speakers will present their views on this topic, and then we have 2 rounds of questions following that. So we will start by having the view of the Anthropolis Chair delivered by Jacques, and then we will move to Marie, Sebastian, and Hervé. Okay, so Jacques, if you want to start.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, fine.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you for the introduction, Flor. My name is Jacques Gall, and I joined the Anthropolis Chair last October for my PhD. And looking back at the framework which Jakob shared already earlier, my work is mostly focusing on the task 2, namely urban life and mobility futures. So this is what I'm going to talk a little bit about now. And in order to provide a quick overview over the objectives behind this task, the phrase here summarizes it quite well. It's co-creating human-centered urban mobility futures in a territory. In the next 2-3 minutes, I just want to quickly walk through the different components of it. So first, we believe that co-creation should be at the core of urban mobility future discussions, as already mentioned several times earlier today. So this means creating, for example, scenarios for, with, and by the residents, the users, and other stakeholders in a particular area. The next part is the notion of human-centeredness, also mentioned already several times earlier in the introductions. So coming from the design context, this means that the human shall be at the center of the process. However, in this case, it's not just the user human who, for example, use a particular type of transportation, but also those directly or indirectly impacted. Furthermore, the indirect impacts don't just matter today, but also for the future generations. Hence, we follow a notion which includes the immediate environment as well as the more spatial, temporally distant context, which also relates to quite a lot of things which Ole mentioned in his keynote presentation. The next part is, of course, urban mobility. So we focus on daily trips of people within an urban context, regardless of means or modes of transportation. And importantly, for trips fulfilling derived needs, going from A to B, for example, to work, but also from trips from A to A for the sole purpose of the trip itself. And I think the latter is of primary interest for future considerations due to the ongoing decay of actually necessary movements due to the increasing service provision, digitalization in nearly every sector. And I think we see it at the moment very well through COVID. And the second last one is on futures. So I'm very happy that I saw already some of the terms before with the preferred and the possible and so on. So it builds exactly on the same idea as described before. And I don't want to go too much into detail, but at the core is that we are not intending to predict or extrapolate a singular future, but that we instead understand the future as a possibility space, which widens over time, a kind of infinite number of trajectories impacted by various factors and events. And the goal is therefore to identify relevant possible or preferred scenarios at a certain point in the future, for example, 2050, and explore, analyze, and describe them, use tools such as backcasting, kind of the opposite of forecasting, to derive policy and design recommendations for today, and so on. And then the last one is we want to focus on urban mobility in a particular territory. And this we define as a kind of functional entity of continuously built up and populated space in which people move in their daily lives. And while the darker gray area here, for example, is say the functional core of the Ile-de-France region and the territory of our current focus, we then zoom in on a smaller part, also introduced already before, the area of Paris-Saclay, which is one of the chair's partners. And yeah, the primary goal here is to relocalize and embed urban mobility futures in the context and the social, cultural, but also the spatial context where we are working, and create a bit more adapted futures instead of creating more generic or global scenarios for urban mobility. So in short, we're working on methodologies to co-create urban mobility futures. We want to localize them in a territory, extend the notion of human-centeredness, and apply and test it in the context of Paris-Saclay. So far, there are 3 outputs directly connected to this task. The first one is from the previous chair. So that was, I think, a little bit the starting point of the task on futures in the second chair. And the other 2 are more recent, so they're not online yet, but they will be in a bit. And please feel free to reach out to us and we can share some more details on it. And then very lastly, we are now starting with building a community of interested experts around the field of urban mobility futures. So if you're interested, please feel free to fill out the survey. The left one is in English, the right one is in French. And it just takes a minute, and we'll also send the links in the chat and show the slide again at the end. So I don't take the floor now from the next speakers. And with that, I want to thank you for the attention, and I will hand over back to Flora.
Thank you very much, Jacques. So let's move to Marie. The floor is yours, Marie.
Thank you for the introduction, and thank you, Jacques, for your vision. From my point of view, so I'm representing there the European Institute for Energy Research, which is a research institute owned by EDF in France and KIT, so Karlsruhe Institute for Technology, based also in Karlsruhe. I think for us, the main task and the main research is going to the low carbon mobility in the framework of the low carbon cities. We would like to more design as well utopia on this topic, but we are more pragmatic, I think, because of the public private funding, and we are searching more, assessing and better understand the mobility in the framework of the city. So our activities is to develop methodology on smart urban mobility, and this methodology are more aimed to integrate quantitative and qualitative method, quantitative and qualitative approach. We are conscious that the lifestyle are really important in the mobility, in the choice of mobility, in the choice of living, in all the choice we can make in our daily life, but also to integrate the technology in this lifestyle. I think the main goal is integrate the ecological transition in our approach, in our territorial aspect. We are working currently on different topics. I won't present it in detail, but I was talking about methodology between energy and qualitative and quantitative approach. We are working on methodology to assess energy poverty, for example, as at the end indicator to see how the people are involved in their can make a choice actually in their energy in terms of building and also in terms of mobility. And we are also working on the global on the location factor and the optimization of this location in the city. So that is, yeah, quite broad. I think we will go maybe a little bit in the deeper into the topic in the panel discussion, in the roundtable after. So I can let the mic to the next person.
Thank you very much, Marie. Now, Sebastian, if you would like to have a go.
Yes. Hello, Flo. Thank you. Thank you very much for introducing. Yeah, so I will just add a few points here. So I'm Sebastian Goethals. I'm the director of CityLinks, based in China, in Shanghai, in Rotterdam, in Europe. But so we work a lot also in the African context. So basically, I work a lot at the intersection between urban governance, transport policy, but also public space infrastructure, and how the disruption of shared use mobility, electrification, automation is actually an opportunity or a threat to reshape our urban landscapes, but also potentially the carbon footprint and the spatial footprint of mobility in the urban environment. So actually, well, we are completely in the middle of a transition time where we see new trends through digitization, sharing, appearing with new services, and actually also more individual consciousness about like data-informed decision that can be made individually with more options and more knowledge. But actually all of this brought together makes mobility becoming more complex to manage, for example, at the city level. So that's why I'm focusing a lot on urban governance and decision making, on how we should tackle, or how cities should tackle the mobility transition. The thing is that, as I said, we are in a transition time, so we are still researching, we are still discussing, sharing a lot of ideas, but we don't know exactly where we go. And what we know is actually that, okay, mobility is more and more diluted in space and time, but when working on projects and even on some research, on some policies, we are still shaped by a very traditional approach, looking at how traffic demand should generate a response in terms of like infrastructure planning and design. Which is actually still a heritage of the 20th century, where we actually look at what mobility flows look like during peak hours and how the infrastructure can respond to it. But actually we realize that we have neglected a lot of transport modes or mobility modes during the last decades. And now that we have more information and people are more informed, there is more dilution in space and time. There is a wish to access quicker to functions or anything in the city. So we talk about 5 minutes, 15 minutes cities, but actually it doesn't really work everywhere for anyone. I mean, cities are not shaped the same ways. And we have spaces where we can make change happen, with some categories of people that will have access to the benefits of change, but we also have spaces like in the suburbs or more remote areas where it's difficult to reorganize space for mobility on demand and more space for people, for pedestrians, for human activity. Yes, maybe there is a second slide maybe to show, and then I will let the floor to the others. But what I want to say is that actually this dilution with space and time makes us think that we should look maybe more at how healthy a city can become by taking the opportunity of those new mobility revolution. I'm talking about shared use mobility, digitization, electrification, and automation. How we can use those transitions to make the streets, the urban environment, and public space more responsive to healthy lifestyles, and potentially give more space. Give a more diversified use of space and improve the general urban metabolism and the carbon footprint and spatial footprint of the street itself. So this is, of course, very specific to cities themselves, to a specific urban environment. But I think we gradually put people and different kind of stakeholders together. So definitely urban governance, the way city decide and take action is important to, well, to take it in account, to maybe make different stakeholders working together, like shared use mobility services, the people, I mean, commuters and the inhabitants, the residents, and also the public transport companies, authorities, etc. So we still at the very beginning of this. And yeah, I just want to open this platform of discussion. So thank you for your attention. Yes, Hervé?
Thank you very much, Sebastian. And last presentation by Hervé Philippe. The mic is yours.
Yes, thank you very much. Hello, everybody. Thank you for your invitation. And my name is Hervé Philippe. As introduced, I am working at the French Ministry of Transport, more precisely in the Innovation and Digital and Territories Task Force. The mission of this task force, quite new task force, is to accelerate the change and the transition in the mobility sector, the change that are pushed by digitalization and also the need for the transition for more ecological mobility. So we accelerate those transitions either outside with our partners and with all the actors of the mobilities in France, and inside also the administration, to change our process, to change our way of working, maybe to change also the mindset. So it's very exciting, all this. And among our project, we have the RoboMobile Life Prospective Workshop. So I'm going to explain in a few words very quickly what it is about. So as you know, there is a national strategy for the development of the autonomous vehicle in France. And this strategy aims to coordinate all the efforts in France to succeed in developing a French way of autonomous vehicle, and also from an industrial point of view to succeed and to get some share in this future market. So I think it's a legitimate approach because we have a very powerful and dynamic automotive industry. We have transport service companies which are well renowned at the international level, and also we have talent and very excellent companies in the field of IT. So we have all the ingredients to succeed in developing and participating to the autonomous vehicle adventure. But besides this strategy, 4 years ago, we thought that it was maybe necessary to have some place to think and to debate and to elaborate some vision about what would be the consequences of a fully and generalized autonomous vehicle and autonomous mobilities in our lives. So that's the reason why the ministry, my mission, the mission where I'm working, and also the Directorate for Sustainable Development, and the Université Gustave Eiffel and the LAET, the Laboratory for Planning, Economy and Transport in Lyon, all of us, we decided to launch this prospective workshop to think about the consequences and the societal impacts of generalized automated mobilities. So after a few meetings, quite quickly, we changed the name because the first name was not so inspiring and it was a bit boring. And now our name is Robo the Robo Mobile Life Prospective Workshop. So I have the, if I can find off my computer, I can share my screen and show you the. Okay, this is our logo. I think that you can see it. And I cannot extend it. So this, we have launched it 4 years ago. We organize, each year we organize a set of seminars to discuss about specific topics. And once a year, we organize what we call a grand rendezvous, our annual grand rendezvous, where we can gather all our community. Nearly at during the last grand rendezvous, we gather more than 100 people. Last year, because of the COVID, we postponed the meetings, and we will organize by video conference the next grand rendezvous annual, the 19th and 20th of May this year, 2021. So in this prospective workshop, there are the important topics that we discuss, and we think that it is important to prepare. This is about ethics. This is about infrastructure, but because the development of autonomous vehicle is possible only if the infrastructure are adapted. But how will we adapt the infrastructure? Will we have very specific infrastructures with no place for pedestrian, no place for active mobility and so on? Or will we design autonomous vehicle who can share the space with all the other activities in the city? So there is a very active discussion about the infrastructures. We have also discussion about the city planning and city development, about the possible scenarios. Will autonomous vehicle actively accompany the ecological transition, or will it generate more and more traffic, because there will be the existing traffic plus the traffic of empty autonomous car. We also examine the consequences in the field of freight and goods transportation, and maybe it will be the driver of the transition to autonomous vehicle. So these are the main topics that we manage in our, that we study and that we discuss in our prospective workshop.
Thank you very much, Hervé, for these interesting insights. So now we will move to the panel discussion. So starting with a first question for all of you. It was mentioned during the presentation, we talked about, we heard about transition. So the first question is about, especially about transitions. So in your views, activities, or in your opinion, how are urban lifestyles and urban mobility changing? Can you talk about the weak signals, the drivers, the trends that are appearing in mobility according to you? And what are the upcoming impacts for urban mobility? So that's the first question, and we'll maybe take the same order. Let's have some quick dynamic discussion about that. Tjark, if you want to start. What do you think?
Yes, I think a lot of interesting elements were already mentioned, which I was thinking about before. But I think, well, there are a lot of things which are mentioned over and over again, and that's urbanization, that's the population growth, that's the digitalization and so on. But I think at the moment through COVID, we realized a couple of things which are very, very strong as changes, and is that we don't have to move anymore. We can stay in our living rooms and everything happens around us. and we can connect. We are I think most of us probably are at home in different corners of the world, and it doesn't really matter anymore where we are. So in the past, we had to move in order to go to work. We had to move in order to get groceries. We had to move in order to do nearly absolutely anything. And nowadays, we don't really have to move at all. So the urban mobility, of course, it depends very much where you're talking on and which sectors you're talking on. So I'm not saying that it applies for everyone in the same sense, but probably 2-3 decades from now, the majority of people will not need to leave the house if they don't want to. And then the question is, can we continue building the urban mobility system in the same sense as we are doing it now, trying to fulfill these requirements? Or do we have to look at much more the voluntary mobility, or do we still encourage mobility, or do we want to de-encourage mobility at some point, want people to stay at home for mobility or for environmental reasons, for example? So I think this transition from mobility as a necessity for the society and the economy to function towards something more voluntary and not really necessary, but just like a hobby. I'm going around by car today because I have nothing, like a little bit like driving around in the car in the evening just for the sake of driving around. So I think this will it will have a significant impact, and it's, I think, something which could get much more attention in the current considerations, because we don't really understand why people would move if they don't have to move, because people do it anyway. So what will happen in 10 years, 20 years from now? Will we just stay at home? And some of the scenarios, I think, which we see in the field of urban mobility, they give us this impression we will stay at home, we will do our virtual immersion, virtual reality staycation at the other side of the world, but we will always do it from our living room. So I think this is one of the transitions which I think is super interesting, and we will see where that goes.
Okay, thank you, Tjerk. Marie, what do you think about this transition? And do you want to react to Tjerk's comment in some ways?
Reaction after Tjerk.
Yeah.
Also about the keynote, that it's true that we can, with COVID, as we stressed, it showed that we can do everything from home, almost everything from home. So it opened some perspective, I think, from one point of view in terms of mobility. But it's also what it has done. I have 2 remarks. It's first that I think it was also mentioned in the keynote, but we are more and more remote for everything, but still to be connected and to be not connecting, to be close is really important. I think that globally all people complain about remote discussion, work, private, everything, family, and particularly the people who are living far away and living living around the world. So I think, not moving, it's not possible. We will still move. A second also thing that we stay in our living room, but I have the feeling that everything around us are still moving. I would take the delivery stuff. So that is also a real, I think delivery increased so much that there is a real question in kind of logistic in terms of inside the city. And for me, as more big tendency, it was also stressed by COVID. I think we are facing two different scenarios from my point of view. One is a slow mobility. I think it's also the tendency of the 15-minute city. So slow pedestrian, bicycle, Corona pistes are the so-called Corona pistes are really showing that. And also the second point of the what was stressed by the COVID is individual mobility. I think everyone now are not sharing anymore because sharing is dangerous. So that it's clear that some fast mobility, I would say in the way of fast mobility, autonomous vehicle, electrical vehicle, or low carbon vehicle are also one of the possible scenario. I think they are both working together and have to coexist in a way. So we have maybe 2 different 15-minute cities. So that is my remarks.
Okay, thank you. Sebastian, what do you think? And maybe I will just read some reactions from people in in the colloquium? What about the social and emotional dimensions? What about childcare, education? What about gender perspective? Or does it inspire something to you?
Yes, I would say, like, well, the COVID pandemic currently has really pushed in some areas the transition of this mobility, and somehow has brought other obstacles as well. But I would say that, well, we are social animals. We still need to connect with each other, and I think as soon as it's possible, there will be a need, a desire to move around again, but maybe not in the same way. And what is interesting with COVID is that maybe there are two aspects that are questioned. The first one is commuting from home to work. When we have to completely change our daily life about work, we realize that there are many new, well, existing already, but now conscious solutions. But with digitization, we can actually do a lot of things remotely, and we don't need to move like the commuters of the last century, I would say. And this was something that was about to change, but now it's accelerating. So commuting is definitely something that would change, and the 15-minute city will emerge from that, from this consciousness brought by the COVID pandemic, potentially. And the other aspect is probably logistics, urban logistics. So we can have access to so much from home by being delivered, but actually it's completely changed the way that, well, freight transportation, but also logistics at the city scale, but also at the neighborhood scale, the street scale will evolve. So this is also something. Now it's actually kind of crash test for logistics to respond to this increasing demand for online buying and so on. So if we look at those points, let's admit that next year or later, I don't know, COVID is more or less under control. We will have a transition in those areas, but we will still need to enjoy, I mean, social life and outdoor life. And maybe while we need to enjoy outdoor life, we will realize that our streets were just designed for commuting cars, basically, in the 20th century. And now we see that actually it hadn't been to be like this. So yeah, between no more collective commuting at the same peak hour, and more logistics and services, and more desire for social life on the streets, well, we start to have a kind of interesting transition, and that's how we can look at how we will design our streets in the near future.
Thank you, Sebastian, for mentioning this question around logistics. Just before giving the mic to Hervé, I would like to read the comment by Ole to feed the debate. Staying at home permanently might be framed in terms of pathology. Think about the Inkimori in Japan. I didn't know that word. Homo movens still needs moving, but how? That's the question. So maybe Hervé, what is your reaction? Or
yes, but concerning the driver for the change in urban mobility from our point of view at the Ministry of Transport, for sure digitalization is one key driver, because it's open new opportunities for optimization of our real-time design of the path, of the means that the modes that you will use, and so on. So digitalization is for sure a key driver of the change in mobility in the near future, and I think that we just discover the premise of those modifications. I think that the people living in urban city are needing and expect much more livable space, so much more space for pedestrian, much more space for active mobility. So it will be also a driver for change in mobility in the city. Urban logistics, as the predecessor said, I think will be very important because at the present time, it's the full anarchy. Every grocery, every shop, every spot needs its own goods, so it orders independently its goods. So we need to optimize and to organize the urban logistics to use more eco-friendly trucks and to maybe to organize this mobility at best time during the day. So it's very important to organize urban logistics. And for sure that ecological transition will be an important driver. And concerning the COVID-19, everything has been said, so I can just reformulate. I think that my opinion is that, yes, people need the society of other people. So as soon as it will be possible, they will go out their home and meet with other people. But maybe we can think of changing the way they meet people. Maybe we can organize some co-working places where they can be outside of their home, but close to their home. So less move in the city to go to the office. And another point I would like to mention that for me, I think that the COVID-19 has also pointed some new, or maybe some inequities, inegalities, and social differences between people who can work at home and people who have to go to job because they have to be in the office or in the factory or in their shop. And when you go early in the morning, I like to go early to office. When I'm going to, you see that people, they have not the choice to work at home. So with COVID-19, you can understand that there are some social inequities in the society. So this is some thoughts about COVID-19.
Okay, thank you very much, Hervé, for mentioning this question of inequities, which is really a strong subject and an issue. Before wrapping up, a short last round, a question on actually the how can we localize and implement the sustainable mobility transition? So what actions can be taken, what transition are preferred? What do you think about the localization and talking about what places do you recommend or do you work with yourself? So let's have it kind of who wants to take the mic to break a bit, not to be too rigid. Who wants to have a go?
I can go.
Yeah. Okay, Marie.
So I think it's clear that currently we are facing a relocation of the people, of the work, possible relocation of the home, because we can relocate working even partly. But that is bring me the question. We see already in US some cities we are shrinking cities. We are trying to attract actually remote workers currently. So they pay incentive to bring people in their city. So good for some city which are kind of desert currently, but it's also brings the question, more segregation between the worker, the non-worker, meaning also the old people. So this relocation in the country or even worldwide has really big impact on transport and on social aspect. That is for me interesting question. Do we have more? If we stick on the 15 minutes on the 15-minute city, it's a proof that we can have different 15-minute cities, but can they be fair? And the second question, but it's more to give the ball to someone else who wants to answer. It's is it the 15-minute cities compatible with the 1.5 meter society? Because for me, 15-minute city should be a little bit more dense. That is it. And 1.5 meter society is kind of spread. We need more space to be separate.
Yeah, it's true. Is it contradictory, in fact?
Yeah, I asked the question. I'm not sure I can give the answer myself. So
okay, thank you, Marie. Who would like to bounce on Marie's question or talk about local aspects?
I just want to make a quick remark on the complementarity of the 1.5 meter society and the 50-minute society, because it's super interesting because it does kind of both things at the same time. On the one hand, the 1.5 meters, while the COVID situation and the distancing really fueled this concept everywhere. And I think there are so many webinars on a daily basis around the world which are discussing the concept of 15-minute city. And Carlos Moreno, of course, here from the Sorbonne University, always being very involved. And without COVID, it wouldn't have happened in the same way. So that the need for us to have space and to have the 1.5 meter bubbles around us more or less makes people or brings people in a different requirement with more space on the streets and so on. And they don't want to spend too much time in public transport. But on the other hand, I fully agree with you. You need the density. You need a lot of people together. You need to have this kind of 50-minute city requires you to have a lot of different functions within that area. And every function has a certain number of people, which it needs in its catchment area in order to function. Every school, every university, every shop has a certain number of people who need to live there. So we need to probably balance it, but I would assume that the 1.5 meter society is not going to stay very long. I think it's, or you can go out the streets now, it's not even there. And that is in the middle of the pandemic. So I'm wondering if how much it will remain as soon as people can go back to a bit more normal. But I think this dual connection is super, super interesting.
Okay, thank you, Chuck. Any other comments? Sebastian, Hervé?
Okay, for me, how can we localize and implement the sustainable mobility transition or the autonomous mobility transition? This is still an open question, and with our prospective workshop, in fact, we are convinced, the little team, the little group who is working in this prospective workshop, and thank you very much, Jacob, which is an active member of our workshop. So thank you for active participation. We try to demonstrate.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure for us. It's
okay.
A pleasure for us. It's very interesting to participate.
And in fact, we try to demonstrate that prospective is one of the good way to open the question of localization and local implementation of mobility. So after 3 years working at the international level, we are going to start to work with cities. So we are in contact with 2 metropoles and 1 Communauté d'agglomération in France, and we are going to start to try to exchange about their imaginaries, and we think this is a good way for them to start to design their future in their city. So we are optimistic, but for us the question, how can we? It is opened.
Okay, thank you very much, Hervé. I can see another reaction for Ole. would you like to have a word on your reaction? Or
well, I don't mean to interfere, but it's a very interesting conversation. I really appreciate listening to this. And I was just reminded about Peter Weibel, the media theorists who renounces the end of the face-to-face society and the coming of long-distance society. And he speculates in, soccer games being, you can watch them from home and you can do all these kinds of things. I don't necessarily agree, but I think it's an interesting parable to reflect upon. So I just wanted to flag that. That's the link.
okay, thank you very much, Ole. I think it's about time to wrap up. Maybe if someone of you four would like to add a word on your, I don't know, current projects or related to this sustainable urban futures, urban mobility futures. I see, it would be a nightmare. Yeah, all right. Thank you, Sylvie. Any other comments, words? I think we talked about a lot of different things, and the question of inequities is very relevant and has to be interrogated, of course, which is quite central.
I would be very curious to hear from Sebastian on this, because he is working in contexts, I think, where this equitable access and so on is a very, very different challenge than what we're talking about here in Paris, for example.
Yeah. Do you have a view on the difference in different countries you've worked with or working with?
Yes, well, it's hard to synthesize on such different
countries. Of course.
I'm working on Chinese cities since 10 years now, and on African cities since 8 years. So, but I would say, well, while most of people won't have any desire for the 1.5 meter society, I think the 15-minute city is some trend that is actually quite famous now all around the world, and it's happening as well definitely in China with this desire for more TOD and mixed-use sub-centers, decentralization of city centers, but even also in Africa, where they realize with the critical size of cities and the potential of digitization, they want to have more intensity around transport nodes and try to apply some TOD, transit-oriented development in some nodes. But basically, well, I would say that what will come out of this COVID time is that the need for space, for more space for people, streets was already there, and it's just more clear now. And we realize that we might need less space for traffic, for classic traffic, and we could give more space back for the people. So when I was speaking a few minutes ago, I showed a few images on the slides. I worked on Manhattan in New York about like a perimeter of 4 square kilometers, where actually we looked at how multimodality between automated shared used buses, so small shuttles, public transport, and a more rationalized parking supply, which is shared and best used in time, could give much more space for the people in the end by managing the speed of those automated vehicles. And actually, of course, when we need to take action, we need to start somewhere. We need to localize. And sometimes it's better to start where the urban environment or even the local mindset is already a bit more ready to accept this. But definitely, so we talk a lot about city centers, I mean, where urban functions are very close, the mixed use intensity is there. But we really have to think about the suburbs and how actually decentralization can happen there, and where people can finally have more access, quick access to to more amenities and more services in their areas. And that's how I think we definitely need to work on city centers, but we need to work on more mixed-use communities in the suburbs and see how mobility can help for this with on-demand mobility services, but also maybe more public space, more services on the streets, while actually those areas are basically completely designed for cars at the moment. And we need to start somewhere, maybe around public transport nodes, where shared use mobility services can be much more complementary and multimodal with them. And yeah, that's where I'm working. Sometimes, well, in China now I'm working on Xi'an, the city center, which they have a new metro system, and they realize that everything was done for the car. So they need to give back space for the people, but they don't know how and how to integrate potentially automated services. So well, I won't go into too many details with this, but yeah.
Thank you very much for this appetizer on your activities, Sebastian. And yeah, it's true that it's really a topic coming out in research, the peri-urban concerns on the mobility front. So I think it's time to wrap up and to have lunch. We've got this suggestion from Ole to have a next seminar between 1.5 meter society and the 15 minutes city. That would be a great seminar topic. Yeah, thank you, Ole, for this suggestion. I think we can keep that in mind. So we have a nice lunch break and be back at 14 for mobility as a service in the revolution. Maybe Tjark, if you want to have a last word on your quick 1 minute survey.
Yes, I'll just put it on the screen again as well. Yeah, so I think there's a lot of interesting parts, and they're very topic specific ones, such as autonomous futures, or there are more urban planners' views on how the city will work, or more societal views. And I think really what has been mentioned several times in the introduction, this transdisciplinary and more multidisciplinary perspectives on urban mobility will probably be much more key in the future than it has been already in the past. And we try to facilitate that a little bit over the next couple of months and years. And everyone who wants to join in these discussions, it's a very early stage. Please just fill out the survey, leave your name, and tell us what you think, and then we'll see how that goes further. And there will be probably some workshops, I hope at some point in person, but also maybe a couple of small surveys or follow-up seminars on that topic. But that we will see. So that would be the quick intro.
Thank you very much. So let me thank all of you for attending this morning session. It was really great having you and discussing all together. So thank you all for the keynote, and to all of you for the roundtable. And I'll let Jakob say a final word and be back.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you as well. Thanks to you also, Flora, for moderating this session. Yeah, let's meet again at 2 o'clock, and I hope we will see some of you at 2 again. But don't forget, it's another link you have to join. It's on your email where you have the different session. Okay, have a nice lunch.
So, bon appétit tout le monde.
Bon appétit.
Bye. Thank you.
Bon appétit et merci.
Thank you, everyone.
Merci.
Thank you, Tjark. Thank you, Flora.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for joining. See you later.
See you later.